Sarah said over the phone, 2.4 million, with a smug sense of satisfaction. Not bad for a place that's been rotting by the beach for years, huh, Olivia? My knuckles grew white from the force of my grasp on my coffee mug. The beach cottage of Grandma Rose. The center of every summer childhood. The location where we created our most treasured moments was sold without my knowledge or approval, I said, scarcely raising my voice above a whisper. You? You did what? Sarah sneered. Oh, don't be so dramatic. She was rolling her eyes, and I could almost hear it. You never use it. You're always too busy with your oh-so-important legal career in New York. As executor of Grandma's estate, I had every right to make the call. I made myself take steady breaths. My years of courtroom experience came into play and suppressed the anger that was building within of me. Sarah, that house was left to both of us. You can't just... Actually, I can, she interrupted in a snarky, arrogant tone. The paperwork is final. The new owners take possession next week. I'm thinking of using my share for a yacht. Ben's always wanted one. Naturally, her gold-digging husband, Ben, was involved in this. I could see them now, enjoying expensive wine in their enormous mansion while they snatched my wealth from me. This isn't legal, I stated icily. I never signed anything. Sarah let out a harsh, contemptuous laugh. Check the deed, sis. As executor, I have full authority. Maybe if you bothered to show up for more than one estate meeting, you'd know that. But you were always too important for family matters, weren't you? It was there. Sarah's preferred tactic is the well-known guilt trip. Sarah had taken on the role of the loving granddaughter after Grandma passed away, while I buried myself in my work and drowned in cases to deal with the loss. I should have anticipated this. I'll fight this, I said. She sneered. With what? Your fancy law degree? Face it, Olivia, you lost. I won. The money's already transferred. It's done. With a loud click, the phone terminated, and I was left standing in my kitchen, trembling with anger. Grandma Rose's laughter on the wraparound porch, the aroma of her garden flowering by the sea, and the hidden reading nook she created just for me were among the memories that swept over me. The mansion was more than simply real estate. It was her final possession. Sarah had sold it as if it were inconsequential. My phone buzzed once again, and it was Sarah's text, be out by Friday. New owners want to gut the place. Don't worry, I already took anything valuable. My breath caught. Anything of value. I had an epiphany, Grandma's research. The one chamber she kept locked at all times. She had me swear to check that one after she left. I hadn't done it because I was too busy with my caseload, but now, as I dialed the only person who could be of assistance, my fingers shook. On the second ring, Grandma's attorney of more than 30 years, Thomas Harrison, answered. Calmly, he said, I've been anticipating your call, Olivia. I blurted out, Sarah sold the beach house, she says as executor. Ah, Thomas said, cutting in. In the background, I could hear papers rustling. Yes, I received the notice this morning. Tell me, have you gone through your grandmother's study yet? I went cold. No. Why? Because your grandmother left very specific instructions about that room, Thomas stated cautiously. Instructions Sarah doesn't know about. Can you meet me this afternoon? In my chest, a glimmer of hope appeared. I can catch the next train to Newport. 2 hours? Perfect. And Olivia, bring the key. Grandma had me swear to keep the delicate silver key secure, and my hand instinctively went to it on the chain around my neck. I had never understood why she demanded that I keep it, but I had worn it since her funeral. How did you? All in good time, expressed Thomas. Your grandmother was a careful woman. She knew her granddaughters well, very well indeed. It seemed like forever during the 2-hour train voyage to Newport. I made an effort to concentrate on the case files, but my thoughts kept going back to Grandma. Until the very end, she remained as observant as ever, always anticipating the next move. Her words reverberated in my mind. You have to anticipate, dear. Not just the next move, but the next 5. And always have a contingency plan. Thomas was waiting when I stepped onto the platform, watching me closely with his keen eyes. His words, you look just like her. Rose would be proud. I mumbled. Sarah wouldn't agree. She thinks I abandoned the family for my career. Thomas gave a snort. Sarah sees what Sarah wants. Your grandmother understood ambition. She built her empire from nothing, after all. But we're not here to discuss Sarah's opinions. We're here to discuss your grandmother's foresight. Behind closed doors in his office, Thomas got right to the point. That key you wear, have you ever tried using it? I gave a head shake. Grandma said I'd know when the time was right. That time is now, stated Thomas. His eyes become piercing. 2 years ago, your grandmother came to me. She was worried about Sarah's entitlement and her flexible relationship with ethics. So, she took precautions. What kind of precautions? He moved a heavy file in my direction. The deed Sarah used to sell the property? It's not the final version. 2 weeks before she passed, your grandmother filed an amended deed, one with very specific conditions about sale and ownership. My heart pounded. Conditions Sarah violated? Thomas gave a small smile. Exactly. What happens now? His face hardened as he said, that depends on what's in the safe. Your grandmother left explicit instructions that only you could open it, and only after Sarah tried to sell the house without your consent. Grandma's preparations weighed me down like a lead blanket. She was aware. She was always aware. Thomas looked at his timepiece. Sarah's at a charity luncheon. If you want to check that safe, now's the time. Muscle memory was used for the drive to the beach house. I was immediately embraced by the aroma of ancient books and salty air as soon as I entered. The research remained unaltered. Grandma's records and business documents had never piqued Sarah's interest. I slipped the key into the secret safe behind her desk with trembling hands. There was a large envelope inside. Grandma's beautiful handwriting was used to write my name. For Olivia, when Sarah shows her true colors. My breath caught. I'm sorry it came to this, my dear, but some lessons must be learned the hard way. All my love. Grandma rose. I opened the letter with nervous hands. As I read, my breath caught. The reality became more apparent with every page. I realized why Thomas had been so sure by the time I got to the last sheet. I picked up my phone and made a call. Thomas inquired, Did you find it? Yes, I replied, holding on to the papers. Call Sarah and her lawyer, emergency meeting, your office, now. Thomas questioned, and the consequences? I remembered Sarah's arrogant tone, her casual treachery. She didn't care about the house, but Grandma's teachings? There were always repercussions for those. Oh, yes, I responded as a gradual smile appeared on my face. It's time Sarah learned Grandma's last lesson about thinking ahead. With her Hermes bag thumping impatiently against the polished table, Sarah strode into Thomas's office like a hurricane wrapped in expensive cloth. Ben, with his trademark smile, trailed closely following. Scurrying to keep up, their lawyer, a young man who hardly appeared old enough to rent a car, clutched a thin leather folder as if it might prevent him from drowning. Sarah sank into the chair across from me and said, This better be important, Olivia. I was in the middle of planning the yacht club's summer gala. Oh, it's important, I responded politely. You might want to sit down for this. She laughed. I'll stand. Just say whatever dramatic thing you need to say so I can get back to my life. Thomas cleared his throat. Sarah, I really think you should sit down. She hesitated at something in his tone. She slid into the chair with her arms crossed tightly over her chest after a lengthy beat. Ben placed a protective hand on her shoulder as he stood behind her like a bodyguard. I moved a piece of paper across the table. Let's talk about the beach house sale. Sarah gave a quick exhale. We've been through this. As executor, I spoke sharply. As executor, you had a duty to follow Grandma's wishes. All of them. Already appearing agitated, her lawyer straightened his tie. All relevant documents were reviewed and… No, answered Thomas sternly. Not all of them. Sarah paused her smile. What's that supposed to mean? A thicker, older paper with a raised legal seal at the bottom was slid over the table by Thomas. 2 weeks before her death, Rose Mitchell filed an amended deed, a deed with very specific conditions. Sarah squinted her eyes. What kind of conditions? As I held out the document, I saw her face lose its color. The beach house could only be sold with unanimous agreement from both heirs. You and me. Any unauthorized sale would trigger what Grandma called the character clause. Ben's hand tightened around Sarah's shoulder, asking, The what? Thomas opened his copy of the deed and stated that ownership would immediately and irrevocably transfer to the wronged party if one granddaughter tried to sell the house without the other's consent. Sarah sank into the table with her well-groomed nails. That's impossible. I had the deed. I had authority. I clarified. You had a preliminary deed. Grandma filed this amendment because she knew you too well. Her eyes jerked to her attorney. She can't do that, can she? The young man's face changed from worry to pure panic as he skimmed the document. It appears to be legally binding. Sarah lost her temper. But I already sold it. The money's been transferred. The papers are signed. Another document was set down in front of her by Thomas. The sale is void. The amended deed takes precedence. The moment you attempted the unauthorized sale, the beach house became Olivia's. The room was filled with silence. Sarah's mouth silently opened and closed. Her face had turned pale, and her hairline was slightly smeared with perspiration. No, she said in a whisper. No, this isn't happening. I remarked, oh, it gets worse, as I moved the last document out of Grandma's safe. Grandma didn't just plan for the beach house. She planned for everything. Sarah's gaze flicked over the page. Ben's grin finally subsided as he peered over her shoulder. The execution of the estate, I went on, was conditional. As executor, you were required to follow ethical guidelines. Trying to sell jointly owned property without consent? That's a breach. Thomas's tone became piercing. Effective immediately, Sarah. You are removed as executor. That authority now belongs to Olivia. With a loud scrape of her chair against the floor, Sarah leaped to her feet. You can't do this to me! Calmly, the first stood. You did this to yourself. I handled everything while you were off playing lawyer in New York. She yelled. You didn't handle it, I remarked level-headedly. You stole from me. From Grandma's legacy. Anger was tight in Ben's voice. What happens now? I organized the papers well. Now Sarah hands over all executorship duties. The sale is undone. I'll handle reimbursing the buyers. And you'll both vacate Grandma's estate house within 30 days. Sarah's lawyer recoiled at her choked gasp. That's our home! No, I clarified. It was part of the estate. You no longer control it. Ben's lips curled. This is theft. We'll fight it. Feel free, said Thomas gently. But be aware, any legal challenge will trigger a full audit of the estate's finances, including certain questionable withdrawals. Sarah's cheeks turned pale. Ben removed his hand from her shoulder. I stood up and said, You have until the end of the month to vacate, and all estate accounts must be transferred to me by the end of the week. Sarah hardly raised her voice above a whisper. You'll just take everything? I looked at her icily. I'll manage the estate fairly. But you lost the right to be in charge. She didn't answer, simply snatched up her suitcase and hurried off. Their lawyer appeared to want to vanish, and Ben came a second later. He whispered, I'll send the files over tomorrow. And, I'm sorry, I should have done more due diligence. Grandma's favorite drink, scotch, was poured in 2 glasses by Thomas after they had left. He slid one in my direction across the table. He remarked, You handled that well. Rose would be proud. My hand began to shake with fatigue as I took the glass. She knew, didn't she? She knew exactly how this would play out. Thomas gave a nod. She was an exceptional judge of character. I let out a deep breath as I recalled the seaside house, its overgrown gardens, its faded shutters, and the memories that awaited restoration. I said, I'll fix the house first. Then, if Sarah lets me, I'll try to fix us. And if she doesn't, then I'll honor Grandma's wishes anyway. Grandma loved sunsets, and I parked outside the beach house that night to watch the sun paint the ocean pink and gold. When my phone buzzed, Sarah texted me, I hope you're happy. You've ruined everything. I gazed at the house, the future in the making. No, Sarah, I said in a whisper. I haven't ruined anything. I saved it. I was overwhelmed with paperwork 2 weeks after I formally assumed control of Grandma's estate. Sarah's financial situation was a complete mess. Everything had appeared to be well organized and polished on the surface. Sarah had created a number of accounts to manage the estate money after Grandma's death. However, the reality became unavoidable as Thomas and I dug deeper. They had bled the estate dry. For years, Sarah had been embezzling money through expensive vacations billed as executive retreats, designer shopping sprees veiled as maintenance expenses, and wire transfers. Ben's real estate business received thousands of dollars under ambiguous headings like growth capital and investment support. Thomas flipped through the most recent set of statements while leaning back in his chair and massaging his temple. She was creative, I'll give her that. I asked, already preparing myself. How bad? Conservatively? He asked, slipping a document in my direction. It's almost $800,000, and that doesn't include the money that was lost in the Florida development. I went cold. The what? Thomas's lips became thinner. Ben's latest real estate scheme. I was waiting to confirm the details before I told you, but the developer declared bankruptcy last month. It's gone, Olivia. Every cent. A rush of coldness descended onto my chest. $800,000. Gone? Thomas let out a sigh. Legally, since Sarah was executor at the time, she's responsible for the loss. Which means unless she can pay it back, which I highly doubt, the estate takes the hit. My stomach rumbled, and there's no way to recover it? There is only one choice, Thomas stated cautiously. Your grandmother had an insurance policy on the estate's liquid assets, designed specifically to protect against unauthorized investments. I looked up. How much? $1 million. But filing the claim comes with strings attached. I whispered, Of course it does. What kind of strings? Sarah would have to sign a legal agreement accepting full responsibility for the loss. It would clear her of criminal charges, but she'd have to formally resign from any involvement with the estate. Permanently. And Ben? Thomas's eyes grew piercing. Ben would need to be cut out completely. No financial ties, no backdoor influence. If he tries to contest the agreement, the insurance company will refuse to pay. I let out a quiet breath as I considered the ramifications. They would be destroyed by this. Ben's real estate business was already struggling. They would lose the house, the business, and their way of life if they didn't get that money boost. It was Sarah's mess, though, her treachery, her repercussions. Do it, I said. File the claim. Sarah didn't get back to me for 3 days. I heard tires crunching on gravel in the late evening. Her white Mercedes was parked in the circular driveway, crookedly, as I could see through the window. Sarah didn't hold off on accepting an invitation. Her heels clicked fiercely on the floor as she strode through the front door as if she still owned the place. She said, "We need to talk," as she emerged from Grandma's former study doorway. "I'm listening," I said, pointing to the chair across from me. She remained upright with her arms folded. "This has gone far enough, Olivia. You've made your point, but this is ridiculous. I'm family, not some employee you can just fire. No one's firing you, Sarah, but actions have consequences." She squinted. "Don't give me that moral high ground bullshit." I took a stack of statements off my desk and distributed them among us, asking, "Is that what you think this is? Designer handbags. Spa weekends. Ben's golf club membership. Those aren't estate expenses, Sarah." Her poise began to waver as she slid into the chair. "What do you want from me? I want you to take responsibility. Pay back what you took. Accept that you're no longer in charge. And maybe, just maybe, we can salvage something here." "Pay it back?" she asked with a harsh, resentful laugh. "With what money?" "Ben's real estate business is collapsing. The country club raised dues again. And now you're kicking us out of this house. We can barely afford our mortgage as it is." I gave her a serious look for the first time in years. I noticed something different behind the expensive clothing and the skillfully faked confidence. Desperation. I whispered, "What happened to you, Sarah? When did keeping up appearances become more important than everything else?" Her lip quivered. "You don't understand. You left. You built your perfect little career in New York while I stayed here, trying to maintain our family standing. Do you know how hard that is? How expensive?" "No one asked you to do that," I replied. "Grandma certainly didn't. She cared about family, about integrity, not status." Sarah's mouth tightened. "Easy for you to say. You never cared what people thought. Because Grandma taught us it shouldn't matter." For a long time, we sat in uncomfortable quiet. Then I leaned forward and let out a breath. "Look, I'll make you a deal." She squinted in suspicion. "What kind of deal?" "Sign the insurance agreement. Acknowledge responsibility for the loss. Let Ben go completely. Help me restore the beach house instead of trying to sell it. And you can stay here until you and Ben figure things out. She jerked her head up. You'd let me stay? My voice grew softer as I said, You're still my sister, Sarah. And I think this is what Grandma would want, giving you a chance to make things right. Sarah's eyes glistened with doubt. And Ben? You know what you need to do. She looked down at her hands. He won't take it well. That's not your problem anymore. Sarah was silent for a while. Then, with a sigh, she took a thin folder out of her bag. These are estimates I got before I tried to sell the house, for repairs and renovations. I thought it would help the sale price. But maybe. Recognizing the folder as an olive branch, I accepted it. Saying thank you, this is a good start. She brushed her skirt with her hands. I'll talk to Ben about the money. It might take some time. We can work out a payment plan, I replied. That's what family does. Sarah stopped at the threshold. Olivia, I'm sorry. Not just about the house. About everything. I looked her in the eyes. I know. But we'll fix this. Together. Sarah called me 2 days later to let me know that Ben had gone after packing his luggage. She said, He said I was dead weight, in a hollow voice over the phone. I shut my eyes. I'm sorry. No, Sarah muttered. I think it's better this way. A new pattern developed throughout the course of the following few weeks. Over the course of several weekends, Sarah and I worked to gradually restore the beach home. With unexpected zeal, she put herself into the repair, particularly the garden. I occasionally saw glimmers of the sister I knew as a youngster, before appearances and prestige had taken over her life. Sarah was outside the beach home when I pulled up one Saturday morning. She stood over a tangled clump of rose bushes, wearing jeans and work gloves. The roses, she pointed out, Grandma's prize roses. They're still alive under there, just needed some care. I put on my own gloves and knelt next to her. Show me what to do. Grandma's letter crossed my mind while we toiled side by side in the morning sun, about lessons discovered via hardship. Perhaps she also intended for there to be an opportunity for reconciliation in addition to the repercussions. Sarah paused. Olivia, there's something else I need to tell you. I raised my head. What? Her gaze grew gloomy. About the estate. And Ben. I froze. What about it? Sarah took a deep breath. It's bad. With her hands twitching uneasily in her lap, Sarah sat cross-legged on the porch. Neither of us was noticing the golden streaks that the late afternoon sun was painting on the worn wood. You need to tell me everything, I replied. Although I spoke steadily, I was mentally preparing for the worst. Sarah looked down at her hands. It's bad. How bad? Her mouth quivered as she paused. Ben convinced me to invest some of the estate money. My chest constricted. How much? Sarah hardly raised her voice above a whisper. 800,000. I almost dropped the water glass I was holding. Jesus, Sarah! Her hand shot to her face. I know how stupid it was, okay? But he said it was a guaranteed return. A development project in Florida? He made it sound so perfect. He said we'd double our investment in 6 months. And you believed him? Her eyes blinked. He was my husband, Olivia. Of course I believed him. I tried to quiet the tempest that was developing inside of me by closing my eyes. Let me guess. The developer filed for bankruptcy. She gave a pitiful nod. 3 months ago. And you didn't tell me? Her voice broke. Because I thought we could fix it. Ben said if we could come up with more capital, we could buy out the other investors and salvage the project. That's why I sold the beach house. My heart was thumping terribly in my chest as I reclined. So, it wasn't just greed. You were trying to cover your tracks. Sarah's breathing became labored. Ben said if we didn't fix it, we'd lose the house. The business. Everything. And now you've lost it anyway. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes. I stood looking out at the water as I made my way toward the railing. Pieces fell into place as my mind raced. The desperation of Sarah. The pressure from Ben. The money that's missing. Everything was interconnected. I said, You realize this is fraud, right? Without looking back. Taking protected estate funds and losing them in a personal investment, that's misappropriation. Sarah's voice was so soft that I nearly missed her saying, I know. I walked over to her. And Ben knew it too. That's why he let you take the fall. Sarah hunched her shoulders. He said it would work. He lied. She lowered her head and let the tears fall onto her jeans. What am I supposed to do now? First, I continued with a raspy voice, we're going to confront Ben. Together. He's not walking away from this without consequences. Sarah's head jerked up, her face flushed with fright. Olivia, you can't. Watch me. We were on the front steps of Ben and Sarah's colonial-style Providence, home 1 hour later. Sarah's pallid face hung behind me. Maybe we should. The doorbell rang, hard. Ben opened the door a moment later. His hair was a little unkempt, and his shirt was untucked. When he spotted us, his eyes narrowed. Sarah, said he calmly. Olivia, I murmured. We need to talk, as I walked by him and inside the home. Reluctantly, Sarah followed. Ben's eyes grew gloomy. If this is about the money, it's about the fact that you manipulated my sister into committing fraud. Ben's mouth tightened. That's a strong accusation. You leveraged the estate funds to cover your business failures, I replied, and then you tried to use Sarah to clean up the mess. Ben folded his arms across his torso. Sarah was the executor. She had authority over the funds. If she chose to invest, I said, you pressured her. And when the deal fell apart, you convinced her to sell the beach house behind my back to fix it. Ben's smile dimmed. You don't have proof of that. I took my phone out. Actually, I do. Emails. Wire transfers. Contracts. Grandma's lawyer kept immaculate records. Ben's face went white. I said, and guess what? The insurance company knows too. The claim is already in process, but they've made it very clear that Sarah's involvement in estate matters is over. Permanently. Ben's lips became a narrow line. And what exactly do you want from me? I lowered my voice and took a step closer. You're going to sign a release. You will formally separate yourself from all estate matters. No money, no influence. And you're going to walk away from Sarah. And if I don't, then I'll sue you, I stated bluntly. Thomas already prepared the paperwork. Fraud. Financial mismanagement. Misappropriation of funds. Oh, and you should know an audit will expose every dirty transaction you've ever made. How do you think the country club will feel when they find out how you've been funding your lifestyle? Ben's gaze became piercing. You wouldn't. Try me. Ben looked at Sarah, but she remained still. At last, he gave a quick breath. Fine. He opened a drawer, took out a folder, and leafed through the contents. Send the paperwork over. I'll sign it. No, I said in a stern tone. You'll sign it now. Even though Ben's lips quirked, he grabbed a pen and signed the document. Happy? He asked snidely. Ecstatic. The pen was thrown onto the table by Ben. You think you've won? I gave a faint smile. I didn't win. I cleaned up your mess. My arm was touched by Sarah's hand. Let's go. Ben's voice trailed behind us as we made our way to the door. You'll regret this, Sarah. Sarah's eyes flashed as she turned to face him. No, Ben. My only regret is trusting you. We didn't turn around. Sarah reclined with a blanket across her shoulders on the beach house porch that evening. I sat down next to her and gave her a glass of wine. She said, So, it's over? Legally? Yes. And financially? The insurance claim will cover the loss. We'll stabilize the estate. And Ben? I sipped my wine. He'll be fine. He always lands on his feet. Sarah let out a sigh. I don't know how you stayed so calm. I wasn't calm, I said. I was furious. But Grandma taught me, emotions don't win battles. Strategy does. Sarah gave a small smile. Grandma was smart. Yeah. The only sound to break the long silence between us was the distant crash of waves. Sarah questioned, Do you think Grandma knew this would happen? She didn't know exactly how it would play out, I said, but she knew Ben, and she knew you. Sarah bowed her head. She must have been so disappointed in me. No, I firmly answered. She gave you the chance to make things right. That's why she put the character clause in place. Tears clouded Sarah's eyes. I don't deserve that kind of forgiveness. None of us do, I said. But that's what family's for. Sarah paused. Do you think we can fix this? All of it? I grinned as I looked in the direction of the house. We already are. After 3 months, the beach house was beginning to resemble home once more. The siding had just been painted a clean white, and the roof had been fixed. Although Sarah insisted on leaving some of the wild roses around the fence, the overgrown garden had been tamed. Grandma's old hardcover volumes were stacked on the built-in bookshelves in her refurbished reading nook. Sarah was plucking weeds while kneeling in the garden. Her cheek was splattered with dirt, and her golden hair was secured in an untidy bun. If there hadn't been photographers around, Sarah from 6 months ago wouldn't have been seen dead digging in the ground. With a chilly glass of iced tea sweating in my palm, I sat on the steps. "You missed a spot. I made fun of you." Sarah glanced over her shoulder at me. "You want it done better? Grab a pair of gloves. I'm supervising." I could see the smile pulling at Sarah's lips even though she snorted. For the first time in years, we felt at ease with one another, cozy, real. Sarah knelt down beside me and brushed dirt from her hands before asking, "Did you hear from Ben's lawyer?" "Yeah. The settlement's finalized." Sarah's expression grew gloomy. "How bad is it?" "Ben had to liquidate his real estate company to cover his debts. He's out of the game. For good." Sarah's mouth tensed. "And the lawsuit?" I gave a shrug. "He agreed to the settlement terms to avoid criminal charges. He's lucky Thomas convinced the insurance company to cover the loss. Without that, he'd probably be facing jail time." Sarah's eyes became gloomy. "I should feel bad, but I don't." "You shouldn't," I warned. "He used you." She looked down at her hands and said, "I let him. I was so desperate to be someone. To prove that I wasn't just Grandma's spoiled granddaughter. You didn't have to prove anything." Sighing, Sarah asked, "Didn't I? It was so easy for you. Law school. Your career. You knew who you were. I was just trying to keep up." I grabbed her hand. "You were never supposed to keep up. You were supposed to find your own path." Her lip quivered. "And what if I don't know how?" "You're figuring it out." Sarah gave my hand a firm squeeze. For a long time, we watched the waves crashing on the shore in cozy silence. Lazily, seagulls circled above the ocean. Our hair was caught in the briny wind. Sarah asked abruptly, "Did you ever read the letter Grandma left me?" I gave a head shake. "That was for you." After a moment of hesitation, Sarah took a folded piece of paper out of the pocket of her blazer. "I've been carrying it around since that day." "Why?" She gave a small smile. "Because I didn't believe it at first. But now," her eyes scanned the words as she unfolded the letter. "After that, she gave it to me." "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, my worst fears have been realized. You've allowed your desire for status and wealth to override your sense of right and wrong. You chose betrayal over trust. I love you, my darling girl. But love does not mean ignoring wrongdoing. This lesson may seem harsh, but it's one you need to learn. The beach house was never just a property. It was a symbol of family, of values. Olivia understood that. You only saw dollar signs. True wealth isn't measured in yachts or country clubs. It's measured in integrity and the strength of family bonds. Learn from this, Sarah. It's not too late to be the person I know you can be. All my love." Grandma rose. I gave the letter back after carefully folding it. "She wasn't angry," I claimed quietly. "She was trying to save you." Tears sparkled in Sarah's eyes. I wish I could tell her I'm sorry. She knew. Sarah lowered her head to rest on my shoulder. "Do you think she'd be proud of me now?" "I think she always was." After Ben left, Sarah spent some time at the beach home. Although the divorce was discreetly settled, the consequences persisted. At the country club, Ben attempted to damage her reputation, but Thomas made sure that the public knew the truth about his financial machinations. The name of Sarah was cleared. Ben's? Not at all. Soon after, he relocated to Florida. Goodbye. Sarah discovered me going through papers at Grandma's old desk one evening. "I've been thinking about selling the city house," she replied. I arched an eyebrow. "The one Ben insisted you couldn't live without?" She grinned. "Yeah, it's too big for just me anyway." "And," Sarah hesitated, "and I've been talking to the manager at the garden center. There's an opening for a landscape designer." "Seriously?" She gave a shy-looking shrug. "Turns out, I'm good at it." "You think you'll like it?" "I already do." My chest grew full with pride. "Grandma would be thrilled." Sarah grinned. "I think so too." The beach home was completed a year later. To celebrate, Sarah and I invited a small group of close friends and some of Grandma's former neighbors. Lavender brushed the stone path, roses climbed the trellis, and the garden was in full flower. Sarah went missing for a bit during the celebration. Under the rose arch, I discovered her standing close to the porch with her hand resting on the new wooden bench. On the reverse was a little brass plaque. In loving memory of Rose Mitchell, forever watching over the sea. Sarah had gentle eyes. She'd love this. Yeah, I replied. She would. Sarah's eyes strayed to the skyline. We made it, Liv. We did. And we didn't kill each other. Yet. For the first time in a long time, Sarah's laughter sounded genuine. The sky turned pink and gold as the sun sank low over the ocean. Grandma's preferred type of sunset. Sarah put her hand in mine. I'm glad we kept it. Me too. As we watched the waves come in, we sat on the bench. Additionally, for the first time in years, everything seemed to be in its proper place. I got up early the following morning and went out onto the porch. Early light stretched across the ocean, streaking gentle gray across the sky. Sarah had already entered the garden, walking barefoot on the grass that was coated with dew. I called and said, "You're up early." She grinned. Old habits. Sarah was kneeling to snip a dead rose while I sat on the porch stairs, with my arms about my knees. Hey, I said. Yeah? I'm proud of you. Sarah's grin was genuine and gentle as she looked over her shoulder. Thanks. And Sarah? Yeah? Don't sell the roses, she chuckled. Promise. With the sound of waves gently crashing in the background, we sat in cozy silence. Even though Grandma was gone, she was still present, within the roses, within the home, within ourselves. Sarah grabbed my hand and squeezed it. We're going to be okay, I grinned. Yeah, we are.